My name is Mary Estelle Reitman, and I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of Saratoga County. And first, I'd like to say thank you to Skidmore College and Professor Bob Turner for helping us. Hello. This evening. For those of you who don't know much about the League, we are a nonpartisan organization that helps to inform voters and our citizens, which we believe makes democracy stronger and our governments better. So if you enjoy our programs and support what we do, please consider becoming a member. That financial assistance helps us do the programs such as voter registration, the candidates forum. It would be quite helpful. If you want more information on your way out, please check the table in the lobby, and they can help you, or the website, which is www.lwpsaratoga.org. This series that we have is Making Democracy Work. So tonight's session is Women Rising, a New Wave of Leadership. But before we get to today's session, I'd like to tell you about an upcoming session that we're having on March 27th at Cafe Lena. It is scheduled to be quite an active evening because we want our citizens and our friends in our neighborhoods to speak about what makes democracy work. It's styled after the TED Talks. It's called LED Talks, League Embraces Democracy. If you would like to speak on March 27th, there is an application process. There will be pre-approved speakers, and that information about that program is also in the lobby. The applications to speak are due Thursday. I think Thursday is the 28th, February 28th. So please check that out also in the lobby. How we're going to proceed tonight, just to let you know. First, we're going to have one question to the panel. They'll have about 8-9 minutes to tell us their views. Then I'll ask them a second follow-up question, and that will be about a 4-minute answer. And then we'll open it up for questions. I have warned all of them that our community likes to ask questions, so we expect to have excellent questions coming from the audience. As far as introductions, I'm going to get it wrong. I just practiced names. Nicole Margiasso. Nicole Margiasso is with Planned Parenthood Mohawk Hudson and the facilitator of the Saratoga Planned Parenthood Action Council here at Skidmore College. Tiara Stewart is up from Washington, D.C. She's with the National Fellowship. She is the National Fellowship Program Director of Ignite. It is a nonpartisan organization that trains women to run for public office. I emphasize nonpartisan. And Nicole Snow, she's founder and CEO of Darn Good Yarns, an entrepreneur recognized by Inc. magazine and was named top 5 most influential entrepreneurs in 2017. So I think we got a great panel for the discussion. So the first question I'd like to ask all of you, and we'll start with Nicole on the end. Please explain what you do, what about it excites you, and why is it important to you in our community?
Okay. Can you hear me okay? Thank you so much, League of Women Voters, for having me tonight for this very stimulating evening. I'm honored. So I am a public affairs community organizer for Planned Parenthood Mohawk Hudson. And Planned Parenthood Mohawk Hudson is the affiliate that covers this area, so it's your local Planned Parenthood. And my job is to basically serve as an advocacy liaison from Planned Parenthood with the community. And I do that by going out to the community and providing education and information about reproductive health care and Planned Parenthood services. And I do that by tabling in the community and also working with or facilitating a community action council, which is a group that meets monthly. And we get together and I provide education, up-to-date, accurate information that comes from PPFA, Planned Parenthood Federation of America, about current judicial, legislative, political issues that concern reproductive justice and also the work of Planned Parenthood. And so that's called our Saratoga Planned Parenthood Action Council. I also do that work by working with student Planned Planned Parenthood activist groups on our campuses, which are called PPGen groups, or formerly known as box groups. And we have one here at Skidmore. A couple of our students are here in the audience. These groups serve to do peer education for sexual health care, reproductive justice, civic engagement. This past fall, we did a workshop here. I co-facilitated with the Box students called Your Body, Your Rights, Your Vote. And they also did an amazing job with voter registration. So here in Saratoga, we have this really lovely structure where the Community Action Council and Box, the student group, are completely aligned. And the Box students have actually hosted our community action councils here on campus for the last several months. So it's a really wonderful way to create access for students and community members to be able to come and create a greater diversification of ages there, and for all of us to have conversation and learn from each other and take individual and collective action together. So that's what I do. I guess I'll just extend that too, that the areas that we cover, I also do the same thing in Schenectady and in Glens Falls. And I do this in concert with my colleague here, Kaylee May, in Schenectady, and she also does one out in Utica. And that's basically the region that our affiliate covers. So what am I excited about my job? Well, I really love to be out in the community and connecting with individuals. I feel like these, Planned Parenthood is such a large organization, and I feel like these action councils and the student groups create a way for Planned Parenthood to be really grounded, I see it as kind of like growing roots out into the community, and as a way to connect this much larger issue of reproductive justice with the lives of the people that are on the ground, to have the conversations, to take the temperature of what's happening in the community with concern to these issues, and to provide, as I said, accurate, up-to-date information, which, as we know, Planned Parenthood is under such extreme attack right now under this administration, so there's a lot of misinformation about Planned Parenthood, and not just under this administration. The anti-choice movement has always really targeted us and politicized us and spread a lot of misinformation about us. So we really have this job, aside from doing all of our services, of correcting that information and really getting accurate information out there about what it is we're doing for the community. You know, the fact that nationally only 3% of our services goes towards abortion. What is the rest of the 97% that we're doing? I feel like I work for an organization that's on the front lines as far as feminism and reproductive justice goes, and I know there's a long line of people who have, come before me that have done this work and even risked their lives to do this kind of work, to do what I essentially think of as providing rights and access for people to have self-determination, whether that takes, whether that looks like our transgender care and hormone therapy for those folks to be who they are, or if that's a woman choosing to not continue with her pregnancy and be able to act on what is her will and her right for self-determination. So that's what really gets me jazzed about it. But also, I think there's something that's really cool about with the giving of information to folks. It empowers them. And when knowledge is power, and when people have accurate information, and then they have the tools then to advocate for what they feel is right, and to advocate for their community. So I feel like it's really a way to empower communities, which leads into that next part. Why is this important for the community? People to have the right to have accurate information and to do with it whatever they want. But I do think that that piece of empowering community is crucial and essential to a real democracy, be able to make informed decisions. And then, more largely, all this political advocacy that we're doing for Planned Parenthood is supporting this organization to continue to do the important work that it does and offer the range of services that we do for the community, which ranges, from reproductive health care to cancer screening to primary care to victim advocacy services, comprehensive sex education in our schools. We're really, leading on the front lines as far as these issues go, and I'm really proud to be supporting that larger mission as well.
is on. Can you guys hear me? Yeah. Oh, perfect. So first I want to say thank you all for being here with us. Out of all the places you could have been here, you chose to be here. So I really do appreciate you. And I don't know what you're thinking about right now. It looks like everyone is engaged. You can be thinking about, did my husband take the dog out? Or for the students, I have a paper due tomorrow that I didn't even start. So regardless, you're making me feel like you're engaged, so I appreciate that. But my name is Tiara Stewart, and I serve as the National Fellowship Program Director with Ignite National, which is a national nonpartisan 501c3 nonprofit that trains young women to run for public offices in the United States. And I am super excited about this work. And though we do have K through 12 programming, I exclusively focus on the fellowship program, which is college program mainly. And through Ignite, our young women will learn how to analyze and make policy, build the skills that they need to make a run for office, connect with elected officials, gain access to internships and jobs in a political arena, and ultimately launch their political careers. So this year alone, we will engage 10,000 young women across the nation, and I am in charge of 15 different states across the nation, so I am always on the road. And these young women are in charge of organizing locally in their communities, getting on college campuses, and igniting college chapters as well. So we have, at this time, I believe, 150 college chapters in different parts of the United States and growing. And I can't even keep up with it. Like, I haven't slept in 2 weeks. But despite that, let's talk about what happened in 2018. So in 2018, as you know, women make up 51% of the population, yet we only make up less than 23% of the elected representation here in the United States. So in 2018, we went from 20% to 23% in Congress, from 12% to 18% governors, from 25% to 27% in legislators, and then still around 22%, and it might have went down for women elected to mayor's offices. And of that was 80% Democratic women, which was an increase from 73%, and then 20% Republican women, which was actually a decrease from 27%. So still a lot of work to do in the Republican Party. But when I talk about these things, what gets me up in the morning? What drives me? The first question that I ask all my fellows in our first one-on-one check-in, that moment when you're in bed and you're at depletion, you have nothing else to give, what is getting you out of the bed? What is going to drive you out of the bed? And what drives me and gets me up out of the bed is knowing that we still have a lot to do in order to push the needle towards gender parity. And 1968, one of the most historic years of American history. Why do I say that? Was it the assassination of John F. Kennedy? Was it because Smith and Carlos, the first two African-American athletes who raised their fists in protest against racial discrimination in the U.S. as they were claiming the gold and bronze medal at the Summer Olympics? Was it because we had the first two people on the moon? Was it because Star Trek aired American television's first interracial kiss? Or was it because they assassinated one of the greatest leaders of this universe and the leader of the civil rights movement, Martin Luther King? When I look to 1968, Shirley, raise your hand if you know if that name rings a bell. When I look to 1968, I look because I see someone who looks like me elected to Congress for the first time, the first African-American woman elected to Congress, the first African-American woman to serve in Congress and to run for president. But she wasn't supported by the Black political party because she was a woman. And she wasn't supported by white women because she was Black. So I look to her because she is a representation of why it's important for me to keep going despite all the obstacles I might see. And I don't care in this position, I don't care if you're white, Black, Asian, Hispanic, I don't care if you're Muslim, Catholic, I just want to see more women in office, and I just want to see more women working together in order to push the needle against gender parity, because we can't do it so separated as we are, and as we have seen in history. So what excites me is to know I have a lot of work to do, but also know that there were people who were bold and courageous despite what they were up against, who decided to get up. And so how dare I not decide to get up? And how dare I sleep and watch TV all day or do something for my own self-achievement? I could be working in finance right now, be making a whole lot more money, but I would still look out into the world and I would still see that there is a lot of work to do and I'm not a part of it. So why is this important? You can choose to get involved. So if you do choose to get involved, you choose to weigh on important issues that are directly connected to you and things that you care about, the people in your community and your family. And you can choose not to get involved. Just know that there's going to be people who act and speak in your absence. So with or without you, the system will still work. And that's why it's important.
Thank you.
Nicole Snow. I'm used to having more than one Mary, but two Nicoles, geez.
That's so hard to follow up with, so. Yeah, so, Darn Good Yarn, have any of you heard of my company? Couple books. So, what Mary was talking about, we were actually just named the fastest growing company in the capital region. We're an e-commerce company. We actually beat out all the boys too, so sorry men in the room. Yeah, it's cool. When you look at the list that was published by Inc., and you look at the capital region area small businesses, we grew by about 903% over 3 years, and like our closest competitor was around 400-something%. So I'm really proud of the work that my team has done. What makes Darn Good Yarn special? So I started the business 11 years ago. I just wanted to learn how to knit. I don't know if I have any knitters or crocheters in the house. Yeah, there we go. Looks like my bag, who knows? But I just really had this idea. I didn't really know where it was going. I just wanted to learn how to knit. I had another small business that was importing from India, and I said, all right, let me try to get some cool yarn in from India or Nepal, and I wound up coming onto this one product called recycled silk yarn. And at the time, 11 years ago, it really sucked. It was processed improperly, it smelled terribly, so I had a lot of work cut out for myself, but I saw there was potential in this product. So it's a little different from my other panelists, like with their course of action, how they make change in the world. This silk, I thought this was neat. This was a really eco-friendly product, 100% recycled. Let's try to have some fun with it and actually develop a business out of it. So I had this little side business, Darn Good Yarn. The name was honestly a total joke. I didn't take myself seriously as an entrepreneur. I looked around, Inc. magazine and Entrepreneur magazine, things like that, featuring men. And women don't really get a huge say in what's going on out there. You even look at angel investing and venture that's even going on out there. Something like 2% of that is going to women at this point. And so it's not like I had a mentor. So I didn't take myself seriously as an entrepreneur, put one foot in front of the other. The business started to grow a little bit. So the next time I went around to order something significant, which for me at the time was 50 balls of yarn, and I remember making my purchase order and going well, if the business fails, everyone's getting scars for a real long time. And my supplier I was working with in Nepal at the time, he was like, oh, this is going to be about 3 months. I'm like, whoa. Last time I ordered, it was a couple of weeks. FedEx got it to my door, no problem. And he's saying months now. I'm like, what's going on here? And he was explaining how the women that were making this yarn, because it's hand spun in people's homes, they're going out into the fields and they're rolling hand-rolled cigarettes and they're selling them in the streets and they're piecing together their microeconomy. And I said, wait a second, there's something more to this. So I backed up and I said, I can take this concept. I think the yarn is cool and there's a big story here. And I said, let me put my business hat on and start to use Darn Good Yarn as a conduit to actually create sustainable employment throughout the year. Because the cool thing is, you guys are seeing my kid go in and out right now, childcare can be an issue if you're a working mom. So imagine now you're dealing with caste discrimination, gender discrimination in a lot of these places that we're working in. Literacy is not probably part of your world either. I'll tell you a little story about that if I have time, how it affected us actually today, that literacy component. And I said, you know, if we can create the sustainable employment and really create demand and tell a story and do the things right within this business model, there could be something here. And since I started the business, I mean, we've had this sort of curve. We moved into our Clifton Park location about 7 months ago into 12,000 square feet, which you gotta understand, I started from a box of yarn. So, you know, out of my savings account. So I didn't have any sexy like venture funding, no Shark Tank, nothing like that. This was Nicole Snow writing a check out of our account and going for it every step of the way. But the cool part of it is now that even moving in July, August, I had 8 employees at that time, and at the scale that we're growing, I have now 18 employees. So it's this tremendous growth curve, and this is an opportunity to serve our local community. As an employer, I can't really say this, so Nicole Snow, not the employer saying this, we kind of run like a sorority. We tend to be, I'm very into empowering the women that work for me. My husband works for me, and there's 2 other gentlemen that work for me. All the rest are women. So it's a pretty awesomely charged atmosphere. My operations manager, for example, and investing back into my employees, and this is what makes it special. She's going back to school for coding, actually through a course that Mary's associated with. So if anyone's interested in coding, reach out to me afterwards. I can get you hooked up with that. But investing in our local community, in our women, seeing that, you know, they have, it's been interesting that from an employer perspective, not to see women kind of disempowered a little bit. Like, you know, they come into this entrepreneurial environment, hyper growth, and I go like, okay, this is your resume, cool. Can you be entrepreneurial? Do you have a good attitude? And they kind of cap themselves out. And the thing that gets me so excited is that I go in and I say, okay, how are we going to crack this nut? How are we going to extract the most out of you? So I love to talk about my operations manager as an example. She came to work for me 4 years ago, public relations major out of Plattsburgh. She's working at a gym, didn't really know she didn't know her path, and I think we've all been there in our early 20s, not knowing. And I'm like, and I just got to kind of go in and say, okay, I mean, now she's managing 70 suppliers, international suppliers. She's dealing with sea freight, and this is like difficult stuff that people go to school for. She's learning it on the fly. She's going back to school for coding. She's coding our website on the fly, and then you're watching her blossom. She just purchased her first house, and so you're like, okay, there's some local area magic aside from building this kind of really complicated supply chain on the other side of the world. So, you know, it sounds like a whole bunch of things. I didn't really know what I was doing as a business owner. I was on a flight, and I was sitting next to this gentleman. I'm telling him about darn, kind of what I just told you. And he's like, oh, so you run a triple bottom line business. I'm like, what the hell is that? Has anyone heard of this concept? Okay, yes. So we're all in the company. So it's this idea, and I love it. And this is what we run by. So triple bottom line business really establishes the success of the business as a whole. 3 principles, 3 P's actually, easy to remember. So profit, you know, you need to make money to keep yourself funded. The second is the planet. So we have that recycled thing going on. We've saved over 2 million pounds of waste since inception. We're going to landfills, really just being dumped in rivers. A lot of places in India, it's just, whoop, that's what happens. And then the third is the people. So taking care of people in your supply chain, making sure, you know, we're paying for doctors to go into villages and take care of people there. And then the other side is making sure that even the people that work for me, there's a general overall holistic health to what they're doing. So yeah, that's how we run. The triple bottom line framework, I think, is such a cool concept because capitalism gets a pretty bad rap. Oh, those bad business owners and things like this, and you know, sort of pirates, and the concept around sort of the conscientious capitalism, triple bottom line framework allows a business to operate, I think, in a way that holistically cares for all of the places that it touches, because a small business has a lot of tentacles as it starts to grow. And so that's why I'm super passionate why I'm here. If I have time for literacy, do I have one second?
We have a second question.
Okay,
I'm going to do a little advertisement for my professional as opposed to my recap. Just talking about a program. Sorry. I'm going to do a plug for my professional. The coding course she's talking about is being coordinated with the Saratoga County Prosperity Partnership. Jen is here from the partnership. I work there too, but I'm leave tonight. So if anybody's interested in the coding course, see Jen. The second quick question, you've sort of alluded to this because it sounds like young women come to you for advice on what to do. You have to. Your team and young women. But what is the one piece of advice that you would give women if they were following your footsteps or want to work on the same issues? In other words, how can they be leaders? How do they overcome challenges? Nicole on the other end. You want to go first?
The first thing that comes to mind for me is just about trusting yourself. So much easier said than done, but you know, I think instead of like thinking about all the logistical steps to make to get to where you need to be, trusting whatever passion you have, trusting what makes you feel most alive, trusting what makes you feel like your spirit is most vibrant, and finding ways to pursue that. And if you have a life where maybe financially you can't just throw it all out and go do what you want to do, finding ways to integrate that into your life so that it's something that you're always nurturing, kindling. And I think the more that you trust that and bring that into your life, the more it starts to grow, the more opportunities become available to you, and the more confidence you have in yourself that you are on the right path to do what you want to do. And I really believe that every single one of us has incredible, unique contributions and important work that we all need to do in the world. And I just think that we all deserve to have the space and the right to pursue that and trust that and let that shine.
Dear.
Thank you. Yes. So mine really boils down to two things. And so I lead this workshop called Hope versus Despair. I've actually done this with like middle school all the way up to adult working professionals. And it talks about two main factors to come from a place of despair and to stay in a place of hope. One being your environment and being in a growth environment, and two being your word. And that part, your word, that's like the biggest stumble, especially amongst adults and young women, as even when we're talking about kind of integrating them in the political arena. But your word, what do I mean by your word? And the first thing I say to them is be impeccable with your word. And then they look at me, kind of like how some of you are looking at me right now. Mm-hmm. What is impeccable? And most of the time, people don't actually know the meaning of impeccable. So if we break it down to impeccable, sinning against oneself or self-rejection. So to be impeccable is without sin against yourself, without self-rejection. So if you're impeccable with your word, you're not using your words as a weapon against oneself. And most of our biggest problem is how we speak to ourselves and what we say to ourselves and what we are capable of, as if we should have the right to sit at this table. But before anybody in all these external places have counted us out, we in our minds have already counted us out. So my biggest piece of advice is to be impeccable with your word. And that is practice. It is not something that you just have, it's something you have to practice. It is something as leaders we have to model what that looks like. So I consider myself in my world the most confident person that I've ever met, because there's nothing anybody can say to build me up, nor there's nothing that anybody can say to tear me down, because I have practiced being impeccable with my word. And the second thing, as a leader, the more you have to manage, the more conflict you'll have. So the further up you go, the more conflict you have to deal with. So always focus on that. Put your hands up in the air. Look at your hands. What? Look at my hands. Yes, put your hands up. Look at your hands. What do you have in your hands? And what will you do with what's in your hands? We're so focused on everything that we have no control over that we miss pouring all that energy on what we have in our hands. We have two hands. One is to build, and one is to fight. Battle and build. Battle and build. So, your word, be impeccable with your word. Use both hands. Build, battle, build, and fight. So that is my advice.
So I like to run my business with a funny idea that I like to make my mom proud. It's a really simple thing. So, going back to the idea, Inc. magazine didn't necessarily have my mentor on the cover. And I had to just sort of figure out the right way along the way. I wrote the book. There's no this is how to run Darn Good Yarn or any e-commerce book. And God, I wish there was. That was something decent. But the reality is that, I think women, at least when I find who come into my world, they don't trust their gut. And it's like, man, that's your most important asset. You are we've been trained to sort of oh, I see Mary over here, she's nodding, she must be agreeing with me. Okay, we got this going on. We're trained in this sort of second language I think in a bigger way than we realize, and it plays into this gut. And I think we shut it down. We think we're doing the right thing, and at least in the business atmosphere, it's let me be masculine about this, and let's get the best price and do all this. And that's not what it's about. I think, I think about what would my mom be proud, right? And is she proud that we're making over 600 jobs in another country? Yeah. If I followed what I learned in business school, those 600 jobs wouldn't be made. I'd be going to really easy manufacturing processes. We're doing it the hardest effing way ever. You would not believe how difficult it is sometimes to manage the supply chain. And you just go, okay, but this is what feels right with me. And that's you're starting out, students in the back, you're starting out. Don't turn off that voice in your head. I turned the voice off in my head and it almost killed me. And I'll tell you the story. I was in the Air Force. So I had that's what paid for my way through college. I was an Air Force officer, wound up getting out commissioned. And it's because I turned that voice off. I've been a creative kid my whole life. I was in my craft, I had a little craft section in my basement, and I was selling crafts to myself. I was meant to own this company. Come on. And then I go with the Air Force. And it's not the military was bad. It had good things in its own areas of concern, right? But it almost got me killed, with deployment. And I'm seeing my friends come back with PTSD, and I'm like, whoa, this isn't who I am. And it was because I turned that off, that voice. It almost took me down an irreparable path. And I was able to get out and sort of get my grounding back again. And luckily, I just had supportive people, and I chose to cut up all the bad leaves and the bad pieces of the tree, and prune that so that I had the good voices talking to me again, to help reignite that voice that I heard talking to me. So that's, I think, my best piece of advice is, rule 2 is, look, don't turn that voice off and then make your mom proud.
You're here to make Mom proud. Why don't we, since our audience has been so good sitting listening to us, I think you've engaged them quite well, why don't we open it up, and if people have questions, please ask our panelists, and just give us your name and who you want to answer the question, or all three, and we'll go from there. So who would like to go first? Oh, come on, there has to be a question. I brag about how dynamic the room is. Somebody's got to ask a question.
Hi, I'm Ann Needham. Yes, I need this, don't I? I'm Ann Needham, and I just want to talk about my own sensitivity that I want women to agree all the time, which is ridiculous. We have different political parties, we come from different backgrounds. But occasionally there have been political issues among women's groups, and I've been involved with women's groups for my whole adult life, where I find I can't handle it very well. And yet you young women are sitting up there, and it's, I hope, going to be really handled a lot better than I do. That's my question, is how do you do it?
Oh, that's a me question.
Oh. I think it's all three of you, so we'll start with you.
Okay, well, how do I do that is, people clearly, we all grow up differently in a lot of ways. So we bring that experience to spaces. So when I am in a room with people who are different than I am, my first obligation is to listen and to understand that their walk of life has been very different than mine. And then I listen and I ask questions. And I don't forget that they're also human. So I don't allow the disagreement in the room to be bigger than the humans in the room. So I always walk with personally in my life, love is always first. So despite if I disagree with you, I already love you. So I'm going to accept you regardless. But I personally, I welcome civil discourse. I don't see how we can grow as a nation unless we can all come and sit at the same table and work out those disagreements. I think where we fail is when we allow those disagreements to make us indifferent with each other. Because then I hate you and not what you like. It becomes more about you and not that I just disagree about a belief that you have. So separate the disagreement from the actual human. That's what I would say to you.
I would say that I think we all have responsibility for setting the tone or contributing to the culture of a space or a group. And I think that sometimes people fear, or women fear, that other women can be really competitive. And I think that we can help to shift that. And so when I join a new group or I'm part of a group, I help set the tone of creating a safe space where everybody can just be who they are, however they are, and that we can hold that space for as much difference as there. And when you do that with an open heart, you do it respectfully, and like really respectfully, not pretend respectfully, people feel safe. And when people feel safe, they start to put their guard down, and they start to open up and kind of join in with that too. And creating that safe space is this like safe bedwork where you can even have really difficult, painful conversations. But if it can be held with a tone of respect and unconditional listening, I think that everybody starts to join in with that. And I found that to be probably the most revolutionary and powerful thing for having successful women's spaces.
Thank you.
Another question? Rita?
Hello?
Yes.
I don't think I'll be loud. My name is Rita Forbush. I really wanted to ask Nicole with Darn Good Yards about the profit aspect of your company. It sounds like you've put it in perspective, but there must be some pressures that you're feeling from, I'm not even sure from whom, but maybe others that you're involved with, to push your profit targets even higher and higher, maybe even beyond the things that you are trying to hold even with profit. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's a great question. The beauty of starting your business so small and not going after venture is I own 100% of my company, so I do what I want. But just like any company, you do need profit. We have a profit share program, we have pension. These are all very expensive programs to fund, and I do have an onus to my employees to make sure that I'm writing really big checks come September 15th. So we do things a little bit differently. One of the things that we've just rolled out is a cost reduction program, but we've linked it. We were working with Save the Children actually. So what happens is if an employee comes to me and they say, hey Nicole, I figured out how to save $10,000. All right, cool. You're gonna get 25% of that savings, and then 25% is gonna get linked back to Save the Children. And then the bottom line cost reduction then goes to the business as well. So again, looking at the whole holistic picture, I could just drive down costs and pocket the money myself, but I think linking it to our core values and leading from that front it is important. And I think the other component too is building a brand. So it goes back to, America politically, there's that hard thing going on right now, and I get that, but it's still it's the best place in the world to live as far as I'm concerned. And you can have a business here. You can do. There's just so many things that you can do, and I think that my motivation is to keep our marketing engine running like a Ferrari, and serving the message out to people to show them what we're actually doing. That then drives profits. Doing the right thing, working with Save the Children. No one's telling me to do that. That's what I feel is right. And I just have to be confident that profits will come, but a little bit of fiscal responsibility also helps to say, you know what, if it doesn't work, we'll all be okay too. And that's just good budgeting and going to the young people in the back, learning about finances. That might be my third point for young people trying to follow my footsteps. I've been a finance fanatic for a very long time. I started investing when I was 14. I think that's one of the big reasons why I've been able to self-fund my company without having to take out bank loans and things like that. having that financial literacy is a big component, so then I'm not afraid of what happens when I have to drive profit.
How are you keeping acquisition away from you? Or
Um,
are you?
No, I'm in the M&A market myself, looking for other targets.
Watch out. Any other questions?
Mom shark?
Mom shark, yeah. Will you make your mom proud? Any other questions?
I'm Bridget. I'm a student here. I guess my question is, like as a student here, there are a lot of ways to get involved on campus and like make change. But then when I leave Skidmore and I'm in the real world, how do you make change and get involved wherever you end up in whatever you're doing?
I'm going to take the first answer to that and say, join the League of Women Voters. Well, I got two Nicoles.
I know this is like maybe a little dated for you, but I find Facebook to be a really wonderful space where, like if you click on like, you know, Saratoga Progressive Action, other groups will pop up that are like that you then can connect with. So I don't know if there would be something similar on another social media platform, but I think that social media is a really wonderful way to get in touch with grassroots organizations and what's happening in the community and upcoming events. And then I find that a lot of us are also coalition partners, so you get involved with one and you start to learn folks from another one. For example, tomorrow I'll be down at the Capitol lobbying with somebody from Schenectady Progressive Action on behalf of Citizen Action for fair elections. So I think, you know, they're all linked and you just become a part of that network. That's been my experience anyway so far with being connected to the grassroots organizations.
I'm sorry, if you're putting your resume out there and looking for a job, I think highlighting that you are looking to make a difference in the world, and then following that up with like really significant action. I mean, you could be sitting across from me in a couple of months when you graduate and, you know, looking for a job. I'm looking for someone that has a fire in their belly and really wants to move the needle. And so I think the groups sort of play hand in hand with what that real fire is the groups aren't going to lead you, you're going to lead yourself. So, you know, the people that thrive in my environment are the ones that are entrepreneurial, which is sort of like an entrepreneur, but you work for a company, you're not taking all the risk of an owner, and being able to come in and say, okay, this is how in being with these other groups, I can see this happening in this environment. So almost aligning yourself with a creative enough and flexible enough work environment that they would be attracted to sort of your extracurricular activities.
And I'm just going to piggyback off what she just said, and I think the very first step that you need to ask yourself is what do I want to contribute to in whatever community that you integrate into, and what do I want to change about what I'm seeing? Because getting involved there's so many things to get involved in, but what I've seen is people start something and realize, oh, this is not what I want to do, which is completely fine. So if you can't define that thing that you want to contribute to, then I recommend to go and do everything. Volunteer for everything that you can possibly do until something sticks for you.
And just to add on with volunteering, volunteermatch.org is this really great free site where you can go and learn about all different kinds of things happening in your community and make those connections. That's actually how I started work again.
Another question in the back, over here.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
All right, great. My name's David. I'm a junior here at Skidmore. My question is directed at the Stewart. So I'm on the leadership of Skidmore College Republicans here at Skidmore. While we've been doing fairly well in representation, we're trying to always help Republican women get involved here. What advice would you have to our club to become more welcoming in that environment? I'm sorry, I totally wrote this down too. especially in this environment, so much partisan pressure and the issue of de facto male leadership in the Republican Party. Because we want to make a future for the Republican Party where, you know, our representatives like Elise Stefani, who is in this district, who does have that representation, and they are the voters and hopefully the leaders of tomorrow for our party.
I think that is a great question, and I think the first step is what you just did, is ask the question and start the conversation. Because first step is awareness, and then the second step is just effort. So that means getting outside of your comfort zone and going to places that you wouldn't normally engage in, those type of places where you will find women who may not necessarily know if they identify with any political party, but how do you plant that seed of interest and how do you engage them and get them to show up? So your next step after you've asked a great question is to apply effort, which is to go and show up at places that you normally wouldn't go to. So step outside of your comfort zone. And effort takes a lot out of you. It sometimes puts you in a state of depletion because it's not something that's easy. You're going to actually have to get up and try. So that is my advice to you.
Jennifer? I'm going to go first.
All right, is that okay, Gary?
Sure.
Hi, I'm Amy. I'm also a student. You all clearly have very considered ideas about what's been important for your success and clear convictions about that. I was wondering if you could identify moments where there was a major shift in your thinking that you, to this day, see as important for your success.
As in the Air Force.
I'm thinking, yeah. I think it's when the business started to take traction really early on. Like people were just like, oh, this is good stuff. And I was just trying to put good old fashioned business ethics into it, you know, good quality, things like that. And when I realized how much bigger my mission needed to be. I was actually thinking too small. If I was going to just sell yarn on the internet, I wouldn't be sitting here. I would, you know, who cares? But when I switched my idea to say Darby Yarn is going to be a conduit to create sustainable employment for individuals who are kind of forgotten about, that changed my course and trajectory. So, and then using my creativity, you know, when you think about an artist, right? Like, it's not that I consider myself an artist back then, but I was a pretty crafty person, like I alluded to. Shifting my idea, saying, you know, creativity can only happen on a canvas or with my needles. The creativity can actually happen in a business model, and giving myself that freedom, and I didn't have to report to anyone. That was a shift as well. So applying that innate creativity, and reading a lot, I think too, about other industries and things like that. Those things, like that kind of idea just continues to pop up in my head. But I think the first was when I realized that I can use my business for more than just selling a product or service. That's what business school teaches you. We're all being taught things in college right now, right? Taking that, but then saying, okay, what's really the next step, and what's that big idea? That was the one thing, and then just focusing on that. And that's really what we've done.
Yeah, you just really took me back. Like I just had almost like Raven Simone. She had those visions. Like, I just and I was sitting in a thesis in law class in college, and I was studying political science. And my lifelong dream was to be a Supreme Court justice. And I'm just sitting in there. I'm the only face of color like this room right now, and not only that in that classroom, but of less than 5% on the campus. And I realized this is not what I want to do. They're teaching me, this is their idea of leadership. They're teaching me how to manipulate people. Like, I could not believe the things that they were teaching me, and I was so against it that I thought that the entire political structure, this is what they're doing, I want nothing to do with it. So once I graduated college, I went to work in youth development, but I still wanted to get into policy. But the most important thing that I learned about leadership is that it is not the acquire of a title or position. It is the essence of service and your ability to serve the people, which is not what they were teaching me. So I realized that I needed to be in the trenches. I believe there's too many people in leadership positions that are so disconnected. I needed to be in the trenches. So I started with organizing and facing the school to prison pipeline. Why are so many of our young people so disengaged, so they say, and why are they being entangled in this criminal justice system at such a young age to where they have 20 years of probation, you're only 13, your whole life is ahead of you, but they counted you out. So I needed to be in the trenches so I could really understand, and that's how I landed back here. Now that I understand what leadership looks like, sounds like, feels like, I can train and pour into other leaders because I myself, with so many convictions about the way of the world and I want to change everything, know that this one being cannot possibly do that alone. So I switched it from that to pouring into the people who can go back and do all those things. Yes, great question.
My name's Gary, and I'm not sure if this is a question. It has to do with the League of Women Voters. I know it's not partisan, but I thought it was gender neutral, but I don't get the sense it is. And looking for the future, it's like supporting women. But why do women have to be supported? Why do Mexicans have to be supported? Why can't we just be blind to that? Someday in the future, I hope that, we're not going to judge a person by their gender or their race or anything. I don't know. But my question is for Planned Parenthood. Okay. Yeah. There's so much misinformation, and at one time I did consultant work for Planned Parenthood, and I worked at a residential facility for troubled girls at Tryon, and I had a person come in for Planned Parenthood, and basically we talked about healthy relationships, how to protect yourself, STDs, the whole bit. But when you talk to people about Planned Parenthood, right away it's abortion. And they're blinded by that's all it is. And I don't think the message is out there what Planned Parenthood does. The other thing is, the only argument I could have with Planned Parenthood is, are they truly successful in their mission statement? And I compare it to the DARE program, where on a surface level it said, oh, great program is stopping drugs. But the research on it didn't really affect it. But there was a benefit to it where kids develop relationships with police officers. So that was positive. So my question about Planned Parenthood, is there studies to show, one, how effective it is? Secondly, do you go into high schools and talk about healthy relationships? And there was a third question on that, but I forgot. You may come to me. Yeah.
My communications supervisor would definitely tell me, do not even try to throw out any figures or represent any stats that I don't have in my back pocket. But certainly there is a lot of research and data collected as far as that goes. Nationally, abortion rates are the lowest they've been in many years, and I think that has to have a lot to do with the work of Planned Parenthood. We certainly do more than anybody else to prevent unplanned pregnancies. And we do so much sex education, as you mentioned, and offer so much contraception. We do, in this affiliate here, the one I'm representing, Planned Parenthood Mohawk Hudson, we have a program called CAP, which is grant funded to go into high schools that are in areas that have particularly high rates of high school pregnancy. And two of those areas are Schenectady and Utica. They have some of the highest rates of teen pregnancies in New York State. And we do go in there and we actually train high school students to become peer educators, so that they're doing peer education about sexual health care, reproductive health care with their peers, because that's where we all learned it from anyways. And we are so grateful to know that the rates of teen pregnancy have dropped significantly in Schenectady, and I believe so for Utica as well. And also STI rates have dropped as well. So, yeah.
What about in terms of healthy relationships?
Oh yeah, so this this peer education is about healthy relationships. That healthy relationships, consent, all of that falls under comprehensive sex education, which is such an important thing to mention because people hear comprehensive sex education and they think, oh, we're going to go promote, we're going to go have lots of sex. And actually what it is age-appropriate information. What does it look like for two teenagers to have healthy boundaries within their relationship, for our young men and women to know what consent looks like, for our school-age children to know that they have the rights to their own safety and the privacy of their own body. And that's actually on our legislative agenda for this year too, is to get comprehensive sex education legislated for all K-12 public schools in New York.
Is there resistance from the high schools?
There's resistance from a lot of areas of New York. One, because we're Planned Parenthood, we're just politicized. We just have a stigma attached with us, but we are also some of the leaders as far as comprehensive sex education goes. So it's not just that we want sex education in schools, it needs to be comprehensive.
I just remember the other question. There's a law that was just put up today or yesterday that if a baby is aborted and it's alive, they can't.
No, we can't really hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't think it's on. Well, yeah. There's nothing.
Can you hear him?
I'll talk loudly. I'll speak very loud. There's a law that was just passed where if a baby is being aborted but it turns out it's alive when it comes out of the womb, they have to save it. They can't continue with abortion. And it was voted down. I don't understand that.
I've kind of heard some, well, you're alluding to the RHA, the Reproductive Health Act, and I've kind of heard this kind of interesting scenario, and what I've heard is that this would actually never medically happen, that if a child was viable, if a fetus was viable, that fetus or baby that was born would be resuscitated, be kept alive, just the way any other human would.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. So that's some of the misinformation that's going around.
Yeah.
The Reproductive Health Act, actually, all it does is codify Roe v. Wade into New York State law. It's the same law that we've had nationally since 1973.
We've got another question over here.
You hold it close?
No, I'll just speak loudly. My first reproductive health care was at a Planned Parenthood that my mom took me to, so she was pretty progressive. But I want to know how you deal with people that are, so entrenched in their beliefs and they're not the same as yours and they're angry. I'm running for office now and I'm dealing with a lot of angry people. And how do you deal with that? I know you can try to make a safe space and stuff, but people who are just so fired up in their beliefs that are opposite of yours.
So the question is, how do you deal with people who are angry and have different views? So Kira, you want to go first, and then you train on this.
Oh, I just practice one of the greatest virtues, which is patience, because I know that hate cannot move out hate, so I have to show up in that space and be very patient. And like I said, I lead my life in love. So despite the frustration that I see that this person has, I still recognize that this is a human being. They're angry, and I'm not going to reciprocate that energy, because if I get angry too, then it's really going to be a problem in here. So patience is a virtue, but really it's patience, it's listening, and asking questions. There's a reason why they're angry. It could be misinformation. It could be an experience that they're connected to in their life. There's all types of things that people bring into a room. So patience and understanding, ask questions and listen, and don't reciprocate that energy. And you're running for office. And as a leader, you're going to come across a lot of people who are angry, who may come in disagreement. And that is just a part of your territory, so be prepared and understand that it's okay for people to be angry. and that you're in a position to redirect that energy. Just know it's not energy lost, and even resistance is energy that can be redirected, which is a good, if they're feeling something, I love people who feel something. You show up and you angry, at least you felt something, you spoke on it, rather than those people who stayed home and didn't care about nothing. So I'd rather you show up angry than not show up at all.
And the one quick,
Then we'll go to you, and then we'll go up there.
just one, I'm just sort of, so I'm not like in the political scene or anything like that. I think about though, we get a bad customer review. Things happen. And I remember the anger I felt. You're like, God, like we've done everything right. And like to the point of rage that wakes you up at 2 o'clock in the morning and you can't get back to sleep. And I started to learn that those people were sort of like my consultants for free. And it was just, I sort of like jujitsu them. And when I sort of took away that power, it got me so damn pissed. You know, like just and we've all gotten to those places. So like, that's that place. I need to conserve my energy though, if I'm going to fight the fight that I want to fight. And that conservation of energy and just going kind of like stoic on the issue and staying as even keeled as possible has really been a help for me. Going back to those customer service reviews and you're like, oh, that's hard to watch, and it's definitely like my integrity and my good name being smeared. But let me listen, let me address, but I'm gonna do it in my own time, my own energy, and then that fight winds up being way more clean and way more effective. So again, not political, but that's just what I do on a day-to-day.
My question is, I'm Roberta Nahill. My question is about competitiveness in women. I'm a highly competitive person, and I think competition spurs me to go further, try harder, set higher goals, and I don't find competition to be negative in any way unless people make it negative. How have you used competition? How do you view competition, and how does it make you go further, or how does it hold you back? I know some people, when faced with competitive ideas or competitive situations, some recoil. How have each of you dealt with it?
So at our team, we have people read like Strength Finder 2.0? It's a really great book. You can go through, take an assessment real quick and easy. I do suggest it actually. It highlights what the author believes are your top 5 strengths, and I'm competitive. And then it's achievement, and it's like I'm kind of the worst of the opposite. And it's, oh God, that would not make my mom proud. But
Now see, that's negative.
no, I'm joking around. Like I love my competitiveness. When I started to break that down though, I realized the people that I need around me. It was this silly little test that outlined the kind of people you need to keep around you. My life coach used to say it really well to me, like you're a rose and you can kind of grow wherever you want to grow, but you need the right soil to really flourish. So I started to really make sure that I was cultivating people around me that encourage that and love that. I remember my father-in-law telling me 10 years ago, you're never going to make a change in the world. F you, okay? Like watch me, and that spurred me. And a lot of people thought that I was like a raging lunatic, and that I'm frothy and like, and I get it all the time still. Like, believe me, not getting too personal on this one, but it happens all of the time. And so you surround yourself with the strength of people that really feed you. You don't feel bad about it. Like I'm happy that I'm competitive because it's made me who I am. It brings the people around me up to that next place too, and that's awesome. We all wind up winning. It's not that I'm leading the charge and I'm in control. It's just we're all working together now in this really beautiful orchestra. So, look at your friends maybe a little closer.
I'll keep that here, Nicole. I'm actually quite competitive myself, but most people don't know that because I would never admit it. Because when I think about what that means, I'm also like type A, perfectionist, like really want to do the best, be the best, right? But it's always an external factor that is giving me gratification about myself. It's like me being competitive is a comparison to someone or something else. And so how I feel about myself, my pride, about my accomplishment, feeling success is always dependent on that external factor, right? So if I reframe it and think about like, oh, that's just me wanting to do a really like badass job, right? So then what I do is think about, okay, I'm at work and who am I feeling competitive with? And then remember like, oh no, we're all a team. And actually, I want each one of us to be really badass because then all of us together are going to do something really great and wonderful. And it's not necessarily like kumbaya, but it's like we all have unique gifts and strengths. And when we all do that really well, instead of like wasting that time, letting your colleague drop behind while you're shining, and you're getting annoyed with them because you're like, keep up, or how can we really foster each of us bringing out our best strengths so that we can create something even bigger, that's bigger than any individual one of us.
Hi, I'm Tara. I'm a local elected. Fist bump to my type A's. So one of the things I learned when I started running for office was you get a lot of advice. We won't discuss the quality. My question is, has there been one piece of advice that you hear, one of these things like never be seen with a wine glass in your hand, or never cut your hair short, or anything like this? What's the worst piece of advice that you would recommend everyone toss out? You've got to have something.
Work-life balance is a thing designed to drive us all friggin' mad. It doesn't exist. You need to be focusing on the one thing that you're passionate about and drive that home.
This one's challenging, but if I can muster up something, there was a time when someone came and did a training on imposter syndrome, and then I had to do some damage control afterwards because she was trying to teach the young women how to conform in environments that are majority men, meaning don't basically to water down themselves in order to not make the men in the room feel less than. So that means if someone's style was to wear a full red pantsuit, that's not acceptable in those spaces. So that was the worst advice that I've heard so far. And the best advice that I can give anyone is to always bring your authentic self into the space and never conform to the room if it's against who you are and compromises your integrity.
Thanks. Anything? We've got another question.
Well, this is a wonderful segue. I'm reading a book right now called The Death of Truth. And what I'm hearing tonight is a truth that I occasionally come across, but it's here in this space. But how do we get the truth of what Planned Parenthood is really about, or what women doing strong stuff is about, or how capitalism can not be a dirty word for some people? How can we get this truth here out so that instead of having such antagonism because we hear different truths or lies, how can we all be working with the real, actual truth of a situation so that we can have a dialogue?
So I think that it starts with what you did today. It's showing up in spaces like this. It's like we all go to the main media outlets, whatever we have direct access to, and a lot of times those are bought and sold, and those opinions are articulated before they can muster up what they actually think in those spaces. So it's showing up to spaces like this, having these conversations, someone challenging your way of thinking, you being okay with it and challenging them back. But it starts in a conversation, and it starts with pointing out the elephant in the rooms. People are so afraid to make people uncomfortable. I'm not afraid of that. I don't mind pointing out the elephants in the room. But it starts with showing up in these spaces, pointing the elephants out of the room, and be mindful of what you're allowing to feed you every day. You have to be mindful and do your research on what you are allowing to feed you every day. You're doing yourself a disservice if you don't do your research, if you're not being mindful, because anything can be feeding and it contributes to how you think. And if it contributes to how you think, it contributes to your perspective on the world. And that can be dangerous.
As the moderator, I'll chime in. I think one of the things that we can do best is turn it off. Is it your iPad? Is it your laptop? Is it the television? Turn it off, have a conversation, and actually listen. So many people are stuck, myself included, and we forget to have a conversation. And I'll brag about the league. One of the good things about our league, and I'm sure it's in other counties too, is that we have regular sessions, whether they're a meetup or, in fact, we meet for coffee, or we have conversations at those meetings. It's not like there's only one way to do things. There's conversations to be had in sessions like this. So my recommendation is to turn it off. Put aside the electronics for a while, have conversations with your neighbor, your teachers, other children, students, different perspectives, and somebody of a different political party, but actually listen to what they're saying. And if I went to, I think it was Alan Alda, doing a speaking opportunity, and someone said, I knock on doors for a political party, and I know I'm going to come across somebody who doesn't agree with me. How am I going to get them to listen to me? And his advice, and I thought it was excellent advice, was you need to walk into the conversation as if you're going to learn something. Don't walk into the conversation as if you're the only one who's got something to tell. So my advice is to walk into conversations as if, and being willing to learn something from the other person. Any other questions? Oh gosh, Pat first and then Linda?
This might be more of a comment, but I'm sitting here listening to these amazing women, thank you, and seeing the League of Women Voters sign. And I guess this is partly in response to our friend Gary about why do women need supporting and is the League gender neutral? And as I think about why the League was started, it was started because women felt oppressed and were not represented in government. And to hear Kara say women are 51% of the population and only 23% in Congress, for me is again taxation without representation for women. So, I want to thank Mary Estelle and the people who pulled this together, because it is important when people are oppressed that we find ways to raise their voices and to find a path for them forward to be seen as equal in this society.
Linda first.
Okay.
Linda, you have your hand up.
Kind of in piggybacking on what Pat just said, I would like to hear a little bit more about Ignite and what Ignite is doing for elementary school, middle school children and girls particularly. I am a grandmother. I have granddaughters who are not always confident in their abilities, no matter how much we try to boost them up. And so I would love to hear a little bit more about what Ignite is doing for young women to find their voice and find their confidence and be able to be on a panel, which you all three are wonderful and amazing women. How are we helping them get there?
Well, Tiara, I just have to brag about her a second. She gets off the train, she's tired. So, well, yesterday I spent half the day with 90 second graders. So, Tiara, why don't you tell us how you deal with children?
Yes.
What Ignite does for K through 12?
So Ignite, we actually have K through 12 curriculum where we actually train facilitators. One of our policy priorities is to have civic education accessible to all young people, because we can go in schools today and they're not being taught anything around civic education. They don't even know how the voting process works. So we have K through 12 programming, and we train our facilitators and we give them curriculum that they can actually implement during the day of school or after school. So that's how that works. Although that's not the part of program I manage. I was yesterday, I went to a school in Brooklyn, New York with 90 second graders, and I just led 3 workshops on leadership. And with second graders, you can't go in there and you can't just spit, statistics at them and expect them to sit down and listen. And I didn't go in that space thinking that I was so woe and mighty that I could do that. So you have to make it very interactive, engaging, and just to toot the horn of Ignite, somehow we have mastered how to make it engaging and interactive so that people can learn while having fun. So that's how we do that.
And are the schools receptive? Because I know with the burden of teachers having to teach to, the testing and all that, are they welcoming to this extra?
Yeah, so all of these schools came to us. We don't push it on them. So that's teachers who basically buy our licensing, and they buy the curriculum, and then once you buy the curriculum, we come out and train you. Yeah.
Sorry, question from a student first, okay? Go ahead.
I think I shouldn't need the mic. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I'm a student and I'm a senior, so I'm graduating tonight and I'm going into the professional world. And I hear a lot of advice, probably partially because I'm going into a historically male-dominated field, that I should act like a man in order to combat sexism. And I was just wondering how y'all combat that sort of advice and fight against that in your professional lives.
Just don't listen to it. Just be yourself. You don't have to come. It goes back to having naysayers and things like that. You have to pick your battles. If you're going to be the most effective you, just block it out, and you got to do you. I know it sounds really stupid and easy, but it's like working out, right? I have to eat healthy and work out once a day, and I stay fit. Yeah, that's all it is. And there's no combating. Go in there and be the best version of yourself. When you start focusing on, and I know I've tripped up on this when I tried to be too much of a dude, bro, in the Air Force trying to do things. I got slipped up because I lost who I was. And that will screw you up. That you're young enough where it will have those repercussions where it's going to take you into your 30s to fix that. When you kind of write yourself, you're like, hey man, this isn't who I am. Yeah. The one thing I see so common, I do a podcast, I interview a lot of women in their mid-20s, depression, anxiety. Yeah. And it comes to this place, and they're dealing with this, and they're using knitting and crochet to get around it. And you say, what's going on there? And it's because they've gotten off that course. And they don't have enough, it's that self-esteem, it's something as simple as self-esteem. You've got to tap into that and build that up before you leave these walls here, because this is the most encouraging environment you're going to have for a while until you get your next sort of step in life, whatever that is. So get geared up for that. And then, don't male stuff, come on man, just be you. That's who you are, that's who you've been working for.
And just to say this to you, if you do so have the audacity to show up in that space and be exactly who you are, I will encourage you to get you a sister circle, because it will be challenging. Mm-hmm. I've been in a lot of spaces where I'm the only woman and the only person of color at the table, and I have to speak, and they expect me to speak for everyone who's a woman and everyone who is black. I know what all these black people are doing. But I show up, and when something doesn't sound right, it's not sitting right with my spirit, I cannot help it. Lord, I don't know what, it's just something, just start talking. I can't help it, and I wish I could, but honestly, it has never changed since I was a little girl. But there's a lot of times, and I'm gonna be honest with you, being the only person in those spaces when I go home, and I have a mean poker face, but when I go home and I'm in that space by myself, in my room, and I have to deal with all of those things that happen, it can get really challenging, and it can be really dark. What has helped me has been to create a sister circle, a group of people who you can call or who can help build you up when so many of these other things are trying to tear you down. So if you have the audacity to be yourself, be prepared, because it will be a battle.
Yeah, and I just want to piggyback on that. The other part too is do not be afraid of therapy. Even at a young age, there's apps out there, you can get therapy for $30 a week, and when you're moving into these situations, if you can't find that circle and it's not immediate, you tap into a life coach, something like that. There's people out there that will help you, and it's worth your $20 or $30 to invest that back into yourself. That is money well spent, especially in your early 20s.
Yeah. And you can call me. My card is out on my call me.
That's the other thing I was going to say. Is that Ignite has programs and things, so check out their website, whether a chapter wants to start here in Skidmore or at other universities in the area. That's available. Darn Good Yarn has a website that's worth checking out. let me
And we
tell
just
you.
changed our DNS server, so it's really fast now.
And Planned Parenthood had lots of accurate information on their website. We can take one more question, I think. There's a student with their hand up, okay? Go ahead.
So I'm a senior, and I'm about to go into reproductive health nursing. And I think I wanted to do that because I want to make a change, and I thought that that was the only way I knew how I could do that and work towards that. And I just feel like this impending sense of dread that like I'm gonna get really tired and really worn out doing that. And I've seen a lot of like older nurses who are pretty burnt with doing that every single day and not really getting anywhere. So I wonder how, like, I like the idea of a sister circle a lot. Like, what are some other ways that you can like kick your own butt to get out of bed and like keep moving when you get really tired and you're really just done?
Simple. Make sure you're feeding yourself good food. I know it's really like stupid, but you know, I remember I had like no money in my 20s. You have to invest that in yourself, and I think don't be afraid of seeing people who are, heading into retirement who are tired, right? Like it's life cycles. When you're in your 20s, you have the energy. Believe it or not, you have the energy to kick it into gear and hold it there for a really long time, and that's where you can start to make really good foundations for the career for the rest of your life, and you have more energy, I think, than you think. Like I remember in college, like I had the worst eating and sleeping habits, and you do feel like crap, but then you kind of adult up and set those priorities. And I don't mean to sound like a mom here, but you're asking about how to like just get up and be motivated. It does require this energy, so you need to fuel the machine. And be willing to say, yeah, I'm going to work as hard as I can in my 20s. I remember like looking, for me, I look at other entrepreneurs, I'm like, this woman started like multi-million dollar companies, like things like this, and I'm like, okay, what's going on with them? Like, there's nothing different between me and them, and I would just encourage you to do the same. Like, be ferocious in your 20s, learn as much as you can, try to grab on to the other organizations and things like that, so if something sparks it and you have this solid base of being in reproductive health, and you're in the trenches, sort of like what you did, you went in the trenches. That's a great way to figure out what the hell you want to do, and then you start reaching up from there when you get in your 30s.
It starts with, what is your why? Why are you here? There's no way I could do the work that I haven't slept in 2 weeks. There's no way that I could do this work without seeing my why every time I wake up in the morning. I always ask everybody, why are you here? Why are you doing this work? Because when your body is at depletion, when your spirit can no longer handle all these different things that are coming at every way, when you're at exhaustion, you don't have the right foods because you've been traveling, and there's not a lot of accessibility to the type of food you really like to eat, that why gets me up every single time. That why is allowing me not to be asleep in this chair right now talking to you guys. So ask yourself, why am I here? And if that why doesn't get you out of bed in that space, you are in the wrong space.
I'll piggyback that. I just want to say that, sometimes we have these ideas of what we think we want to do to make these big changes that are so important. And there's so many different causes, right? And there's so much stuff that needs work and attention and remedy. But I think there's a difference between having a job that maybe is just intense and it's just hard by nature, but it's what's right within your heart. That's different than, I don't want to get out of bed because even though this is such a worthy job and cause, this is depressing shit and like it's not feeding my soul. And don't be scared to, admit if that's the case. You can still be passionate about something and it doesn't have to be your cause. You get yourself in line, what is your cause? And that it's not hard to get out of bed. Like you're jazzed to go to work, even though it's heavy and intense. You're still excited to go to work.
Okay, I think that was a great discussion, so if we can give a thank you.